very available. Love what I'm doing, so it's nothing I procrastinate till I have to do it. Love kicking through deals. So, if you're interested, and you need to borrow private money, you got a house that you'd like to sell really cheap so I could flip it and make some money, call me. But I think the most way I could probably help some of your people is through private lending and some of the experience and advice I could give them along the way.
Yeah, today's podcast is with Mark Wolper. I met Mark, I think through probably Aaron or somebody else through the networking, and we started. I think you'd helped me do some deals, lending to me, and you spoke at some of my meetups, and you probably worked with some of my clients like Omar and some of the other people.
And you've worked for me as an agent.
Worked for you as an agent, and we've done some deals together. One we were just chatting about where we lost our ass on, and it is what it is. When I tell people the story that we bought, I used this story recently. I said, I don't know what we paid, 50,000 for the place or 30. And we ended up losing like 25. Sure. Like, how could you do that? Easy.
It didn't take much. Got a little bit unlucky.
It doesn't take much. Yeah. So let's talk with Mark today. He's homegrown Pittsburgher. Graduated 85, same year as me, by the way. Where did you go to school?
I went to Churchill High School and then to Penn State University.
Okay, Penn State University. Got his degree in economics. Then one of the questions I'd ask you is just your work history. I like to get an idea, like kind of getting a synonymous same answer from anybody who's relatively or highly successful. They're usually hardworking and they start at an early age, So you started, what was your first job was cutting grass?
So I cut grass and shoveled snow in my neighborhood when I was, I don't know, maybe 12 years old.
Yeah.
As young as I can remember, could barely push the lawnmower. So I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, and I grew up in a hardworking family, though.
Right.
And for me to have anything, my parents weren't I'll give you allowance, I'll buy you this kind of people. Earn your money and use it how you want.
What did your parents do for a living?
So my mother worked retail. She worked at a bakery. She raised kids and then went and worked in a bakery. And my father was a salesman. They call it a tin man. So he was a guy that went out and sold siding and windows and replacement roofs. And they call him tin man or home improvement salesman. He was out door to door in C- neighborhoods.
Rodney Dangerfield was an aluminum siding salesman?
Not that far from what my father did, probably.
Sales is tough. I always thought sales was just something that I was a mechanic, so I didn't have to relate to anybody other than a car. And I wasn't an outgoing person. And I always thought sales was like slimy and wasn't an important job. And then I realized after being in sales and owning my own companies now that sales is the most important job.
Look, Alex, when I was probably 14 or 15, my father would, in the summers, drop me off in these neighborhoods where they were trying to sell siding and roofing. And so these were neighborhoods like Beltsuver and Mount Oliver, and on a corner with a stack of business cards and say, I'll pick you up on this corner in 3 hours. And I would go up and down the streets, door to door. And so I was a kid that didn't look like anybody that lived in these neighborhoods, knocking on people's doors saying, my father's company's in here and they're doing remodeling work.
Today that would be called child abuse.
It might be. And it felt like it then, and I dreaded it.
Wow.
I learned a lot of things. I mean, I learned that hearing no is not the worst thing in the world, because
there
were days where you only heard no's.
Did you get paid any commission if you got a job?
I got commission with a job. I didn't get an hourly salary. So
it was all commission.
So I think I got 2 jobs over the whole summer and probably made more than I would have had I worked minimum wage. But, I also, you kind of learn that people are people regardless of if their house is a dump, and that, you can certainly, a lot of these people you can talk to, and it's something interesting, and maybe they're not so different. And, it helps me a lot now because I get involved in properties that are distressed, and maybe the person who lost a property to a sheriff's sale or a tax sale still lives there. And I bought the property and they're there. So they're mine to deal with.
You got to be empathetic, but also business-like too. Yeah. That's a good story. Your dad just says, kid, go get me some money. We got to buy bread and eggs.
Yep.
Okay. So you worked from an early age, from 15 to 18, you worked at restaurants, in the kitchen. College, you did other work just to, make ends meet. And then after college, it sounded like you landed a pretty good job.
Yeah. So it's cool. I got a job. of all things, selling like dishes and glassware, right? But it was a brand name company. It still exists. And I moved to New York and I was in a sales training program. So I followed salesmen around and I did all the grunt work they didn't want to do. And eventually, you get your own sales territory. And I was in the Northwest. So I moved to Oregon, Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
And I had Oregon and Idaho, and I had a little department store chain there and a bunch of little gift shops. And it's what you think it is. I drove around to these little stores with some samples and some catalogs and wrote orders. Strictly a commission job. So and I call that out because I think, guys like me and you and real estate investors, none of us are making a salary. And you're only going to make what you produce. And I tell people all the time, that's the only way you're going to really acquire any wealth.
So were you not on a salary at all?
Not on a salary at all.
College education, got hired, commission only.
And it was so much better than getting a salary. Like,
Yeah.
because we used to joke, like that guy's getting 25 grand in a Ford Taurus. Whereas if you did really well in a commission job,
Mhm.
and this was 1990, you were making $125,000, which
Wow.
beat the hell out of 25,000
That's a-
bucks in a Ford Taurus.
That's a ton of money.
Yeah, so we got no expenses covered. You got a commission rate on everything you sold. Them. It was a good product. It wasn't a cold sale. It was a brand name product
Yeah.
that generally people wanted, but it was about maximizing their business so that they could maximize what they would reorder from you.
That's amazing. And then you moved up that chain eventually to become vice president of sales.
Yeah, I had a 13-year career. When I left, I ran the entire wholesale division. It was $250 million business. And what that taught me that I still use is structure. I'll talk to people today that want to spend $150,000 to renovate a house. And I'll say, can I see your renovation list? And I could cry at what they give me. It's really nothing. It's not a list. And it's not
scribbled on a piece of paper like this.
And it hadn't been scribbled. They scribbled it only because I asked for it. They thought they had it up here. And it's not the way you professionally approach a project. And I certainly realize that there's a lot of mystery, as we were talking before, in these projects, and you can never nail it down. But if you don't have a roadmap and have an idea, I mean, how do you know where you're going and what you might spend? And so this taught me discipline, taught me about gross margin, taught me about inventory turnover. So there's always the question, do I want to flip 4 houses a year and make 20,000 on each house? Or do I want to do one big flip a year and make $80,000? And what are the pros and cons? So I learned a lot of basics that even though the business was so very different, applied themselves so nicely to what I do today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you could take, I read books and listen to podcasts. It's amazing how people successful, they take that success recipe from whatever business they're in, and they can use a lot of it in the next business.
Sure.
It's not much different, other than the dynamics might change.
It's application. It's how to apply it. And it's better than, I think, a formal education, because if I were to sit in a real estate class or be a real estate major in college, my guess is a small fraction of what they teach me is applicable to what I would do.
100%.
And so you're going to sit there thinking, well, 90% of this doesn't matter. But now, when I had a good business background where everything I learned mattered because it was what I was doing, well, then when I got into the real estate business, I grabbed the parts of it I need. And I think it gave me a leg up, because in the world we live in of small real estate investors, we're generally an unprofessional crew. And so if you have some disciplines, and you can run a P&L, and you can run a budget, and you can get all of your costs into a project, you can analyze comps and know what you're going to sell for, and then know what you're going to net off of that sale. And you can run those numbers, which sound so basic to you and to me, but a lot of people can't. It really puts you ahead of the game.
Yeah. The thing about having experience is, you can kind of know some of the unknowns, you can at least budget for it.
So you can put a line on your spreadsheet that says unknowns.
No kidding.
For sure.
The fudge factor line.
Yep.
And usually in today's world, it's a sewer line. I don't know how many times we've had to deal with that, but sewer lines are killers. I'm buying a duplex and a 4-unit actually today, and we did a sewer line inspection. And it came back, probably one of them was good. The other one was 15,000 roughly. So we got this, and it's fine. It's flowing fine and everything. But when I go to sell it, I'm going to get beat up from a buyer. So we were able to negotiate something off the price.
Right. When I buy properties that are distressed, And it used to be the only thing you'd ask for if you want to buy it cheap is clear title. You got to have clear title, right? And don't worry about any other inspections. Now, if I'm paying any real amount of money for the property, it's clear title and a sewer line. Because you're right, it's 15 grand. And the seller knows, or I'll inform the seller that, like, look, you're never going to be able to sell it without fixing the sewer line. So whether you fix it for me or you fix it for the next guy, you're gonna have to fix it.
That's
So let's just do this
that's
deal.
that's relatively 10, 12 years
Yeah,
new.
about
That
that.
was never around before. And now it's extremely expensive. We're living in neighborhoods where the houses are 120 years old.
Yep.
So yeah, it's typically a very important thing. And even if you don't do it now, you're going to have an end buyer. At some point, you're going to want to sell it.
Your
Yeah.
retail buyer is absolutely going to do
Yeah,
a camera test. So you might as well
absolutely.
get it done up front.
Okay, so we were you're in college, you're making a good living. Are you still living in the Northwest?
I was
at
actually,
that-
no, I'd moved around in sales as I graduated through
Yeah.
territories. I moved to New England and then to the New York metro area. And when I entered management of the company, I was in North Jersey, but working out of New York.
Okay, and did you have a family then, or?
So just starting a family, and that it was interesting, and I was traveling a lot. So when you're in charge of sales, you're going to see your customers. So a lot of weeks I'd get on an airplane Monday morning and get back into town late Thursday or Friday. And that was a big reason I wanted to make a change. I was starting a family. So I had a daughter who would, when I would get back on Thursday, would have no idea who I was. And by Sunday evening, she kind of warmed up and remembered, oh, this is dad. And then Monday morning, I had to start to cycle again. And that just, it just wasn't for me. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons I didn't want to do that forever.
Okay, so at that point, you were approached by somebody starting a title company in 2001.
Yep.
This is why you were still working
Yeah, sure.
at that job.
And actually what they wanted was my business expertise. They were able to attract that type of business, but had no idea how to set up and run a generic business. How do I hire people? What insurance do I need? How do I buy computers, lease an office, all this
Right.
stuff. And that was stuff that was all second nature to me. So I got involved in that business for a pretty brief period of time, just a few years. But what I discovered while I was in that business was the private lending or the hard money business. So I stumbled across a couple borrowers and we were paying off a loan for them. And I said, hey, who is this company? And they said, oh, it's a private lender I deal with. Oh, really? I said, what does that cost you? And they said, I don't really know, but it enables me to do these flips. I know it's a lot. It's the only way I can do these flips. I'm like, so you pay them a lot, but you don't mind? And they're like, no, I'm happy to do it because I can do the flips. So my wheels start turning and I start thinking, boy, a business where you can charge somebody a lot and they're happy to pay you sounds like a pretty good business, right? And so that was really, I knew right then that was a business I wanted to work towards getting into.
When you first got into that business, well, let's take a step back. So that exposing you to the title industry, starting that company, that exposed you to real estate because you weren't even thinking lending.
I knew nothing about real estate.
Buying real estate. You weren't even thinking about it.
I was a generic investor in a company, and you might even just call me a business consultant on how you set up the structure. And it could have been any type of business at all.
So 2003, started buying investment properties.
Yep.
Started hard money lending and house flipping in 2003 also.
Yep.
Did you come from like when you started, did you have this grandiose vision or you just thought, I'm going to do this one deal. This seems kind of cool. Or did you already have a vision in mind?
So no, I didn't have a vision. I really was intrigued by the hard money lending, private lending. But I'm like, this might be too good to be true. So I did one loan from start to finish. So
my first hard money loan, it was with Spencer Hirschberg.
Sure.
And John Walker was working with him. Tom Wagner.
Sure.
Man, I tell you what, it was like around 2003 or so. I paid 15% and
10 points, correct.
10 and they had a back end lender that would, once it was done, that the back end lender would step in and refinance. But that was expensive.
Sure.
But I still have that property to this day. But anyway, but just
better yet, Alex, I still have loans that have paid 10 points and 15%. So it's a lucrative business, but obviously you can lose a lot of money if you.
What's changed? It's not 10 points anymore. That was kind of when it was new. I think it was the hard money. Maybe it wasn't new. I was just exposed to it at that point. But
so we'll get back to this. But it being kind of a small and disjointed business, I wouldn't say there's a set rate or a set fee out in the industry.
Mhm.
In my mind, there's 3 local lenders who do what I do, including myself, and, I always try to be the most expensive one. I want the best deals. I feel like I have more value add than that, but depending on the project, borrower, their experience, there are deals that I would still only do at 10 and 15, or it's just not worth the risk to me. Maybe I
Okay.
have a lot of deals out there and cash is a little tight, so I've got to get top dollar for it.
Yeah.
But conversely, there are deals that I love where I like look at the deal and say, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing. I wish I had this deal." Those can get done much cheaper.
I think what you bring to, well, you helped, when I met with Omar, he
Mhm.
comes up a lot in our conversation because I met with a young kid, come from nothing, come from this country. I love these stories. He somehow got hooked up with me. I went and looked at the property with him, like, hey, why don't we partner up on this? Because I thought, I see something with this kid.
Yeah.
He said, no, I want to do this on my own. I'm like, well, okay, you need money. I'm going to get you in touch with Mark. That's you. And when I was there with him, walked through the property, I said, don't do this, don't do that, do this. Because it was located in a subpar area, C minus C area. So you don't want to over improve. He was going to spend way too much money and do too many things. And then you don't want to do not enough either. So adding me to the table, great. But then adding a lender that has done hundreds of flip zones, properties, lended for years and years, owned a title company. You do bring a lot to the table, especially somebody who's new, and your advice, just one small little nugget, could change that project's profitability by a boatload.
Keep in mind, most people I deal with don't even have you on the front end. So normally what I start with is somebody saying, I'm going to try to buy this property for X, and I think it might take Y to get it done. And my realtor tells me it's going to be worth Z once it's done. So the things I can do is tell them, look, realtors are all great and they're all super honest, but they're going to make a commission, and whether they make it on $199 or $180,000 isn't that big of a deal. I see comps that show me this is worth 175. Can you show me the comps that they showed you?
Right.
So one, I can make sure that that property is going to sell for what they think it's going to sell for. I can also then look at their work list and say, hey, is this basement damp? Because you have no money to control water in the basement, and that's never cheap. And they might say, oh, I didn't think of it, or I didn't go down there. And that repeats itself. So I can make sure their scope of work is broad enough, because if they think it's a $50,000 renovation and they start tearing it apart and find out it's a $100,000 renovation, well, then what? They don't have enough money and they're going to lose money anyway.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I can also say is, I've seen people saying it's going to need a new roof, and that's $1,200. And I say, can you give me the name and number of who does a roof for $1,200? And they said, well, someone said they thought that's about what it would cost. And I said, well, maybe for the shingles only, if you pick them up at Home Depot, but there's a lot more to it. That's a $4,000 roof. So I have the expertise to really kind of run a pro forma on the deal and say, hey, you're going to lose money, because if you're going to pay me interest for 8 months and you're going to pay insurance and taxes and utilities, you're going to lose money. And so I can't change what it's going to be worth in the end. Neither of us can change what it's going to cost to renovate it, really. So you need to buy the house for this. And, I think that's a huge value. And some people get upset with me when I show them that, because they so badly want to do a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, why wouldn't I don't charge any fees up front. I don't make any money unless I make a loan to you.
Yeah.
So there's no reason I would kill your deal.
And you're successful at, getting to the finish line.
And I try to explain that a lender that wants to lend you money on a bad deal is no one you want to do business with. And honestly, the lender's short-sighted too, because they could end up owning that project at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, it's bad business as a lender. Yeah, when you said realtor, not I'm picking on realtors because I'm a realtor. I mean, but getting the internet has made it very easy for anyone to learn enough. But learning enough sometimes is very dangerous. And being able to sift and sort and navigate through that information and getting good information, finding good team members like you, like myself, like other people who've done this, is very difficult.
Sure.
Because you and I just looked at that house in Fox Chapel. That the person doing it probably got some information given to them from their agent, and it wasn't good information. And the the way the house was designed and so on and so forth. It could be a huge loss. I hope she has the best of luck
Alex, I
getting
think
rid of it. But
what happens is the investor says to the realtor, what could this be worth on the end? And the realtor says, let me see what the best stuff that's ever sold in this street or this subdivision sells for. And those might not be the best comps, because things I will see is my client is doing a sided, a frame, split entry. And those, they're fine, but they're not as good in this market as a brick 2-story colonial. And all the comps are brick 2-story colonials. And I say, hey, did they send you any split entries or ranches? Because those usually sell for a different price, and we're going to have a different end game that way. Well, no, they didn't send me any. So I was like, okay, I wonder if there weren't any or if they skipped them. And I go and I look, and they didn't find them because they were only looking for the top 3 sales in the neighborhood. And I'll say, hey, here's a split entry, same square footage as you, 6 houses down. It was probably the same builder and built the same year. And it was pretty nicely renovated. You'll be a little bit better. And that's what you're worth. You're worth a little more than this one. You can't compare yourself to these brick 2
yeah,
stories.
so well, maybe, without being too hard on that realtor, just talking about that project, maybe that agent wasn't too far off, because that was an amazing lot.
The one in Fox Chapel.
Yeah, and with that Governor's Drive, it just the layout, the square footage of the living space and the size of the bedrooms, and it just wasn't there. But given if it was laid out properly and was maybe a little larger, maybe that was a high sale.
So I also think, especially in Pittsburgh, when you have neighborhoods that are really close to each other, but they can be vastly different. So you have Etna and Fox Chapel are very close to each other, but obviously have much different values.
Right.
Realtors, you really can use a specialist in certain neighborhoods. Certain neighborhoods, any old realtor is fine. Certain neighborhoods, and Fox Chapel is one of them. I would tell somebody, find a really good local agent, because that local agent's going to say, hey, do you know this feeds into this elementary school? And that's not the elementary school they want. The big money goes into this elementary school.
Right.
Or people like to be below this road because you're closer to Route 28, or above this road because you're closer to the turnpike. And these agents know why the same house to you and I in Fox Chapel could be worth 25% difference. And I think that's maybe where hers missed.
Maybe get another opinion. So we talked about where you came from, how you got started. Right now, what's the kind of project, like what was did you start out with an initial goal when you started? You were just winging it, right?
No, I had a goal. I wanted to build a hard money company. I didn't want to have employees. Because Alex, you have employees, and I know you love your employees, but I tell people it's harder to have employees than a boss. I'd rather have a boss. So, but I wanted a business where I had 0. I didn't have a boss. I didn't have employees.
Okay.
So I said I want a hard money business that is as profitable as I could make it. Because of course, in the end, that's one of the big reasons we do things is for profitable, where I don't have to hire employees. So that was kind of my thinking. So I did a test deal, and I ran it from day 1 till the loan was paid off and I satisfied the mortgage, the end, just to make sure there wasn't something I was missing in the process.
Right.
Went through the process. There were a couple little things I didn't think about, but overall, I'm like, okay, this is good. Now I'm going to go out and try to get more of this business. But in doing that, I'm meeting realtors and I'm saying, hey, if you have a customer that needs private loans, send them my way. Well, these realtors would call me and say, hey, I have a house. I know you're kind of involved in the house flipping business. I have a house that would be perfect to flip. Are you interested?
Nice.
And so I would say, I had a friend at the time who's a contractor. And I'd say, yeah, let me come out with my friend. And that's kind of how the house flipping business started. It kind of was an offshoot that I never thought I would get into. But when the opportunity's there and it's right.
Right.
And then fortunately, they're very lucky, and the business has worked well, and there were profits. And that's how I became a landlord, and I own investment property, because I really like having my money in real estate more than I like having my money in the stock market or in any other investment that I know of that I would go into. So as I made money, and I've always been a fairly frugal person, maybe to a fault, the money I've saved has generally gone invested back into income producing real estate.
And that's probably come from your background, watching your mom and dad not necessarily struggle, but they definitely weren't well off. They worked for every penny, and they started you at an early age, dropping you off at the corner in not the greatest neighborhood and saying, go get me some siding jobs. And you've taken those lessons from 10 years old through your jobs delivering subs, and because you learn something from every job, no matter what, right? Your college education, kicking butt as vice president of sales of that company, but wanting to spend more time with your family and realize that wasn't going to work forever. Jumped into another business. From that business, you've got into a few other businesses.
Sure.
And then that set your life path to where you're at now.
Sure.
And you haven't deviated from that since what, like 2006? You've probably been doing
probably a little sooner. I've been doing hard money since 2003, which is forever, right?
Almost
in the world,
20 years.
Yeah, in the world we're in, that's forever, right? And the first guys you mentioned, they've kind of come and gone, although I'm still friends. I see Tom Wagner occasionally, and I'm still friends with John Walker. I see him all the time, but they're not in that business anymore. So, I'm probably the longest running hard money guy in the city. And if you've been flipping houses for 20 years, you've been doing that forever. Now, investing in real estate's a little bit different because people have been doing that since the dawn of time, right? But I've been doing that for a long time too. And those are the three things I do.
Have you seen, I have on my end, because I'm an agent, we do property management, and I'm in the same realm as you as far as finding properties and everything. Have you seen a super huge jump in the demand for real estate here and the amount of people that we're competing against?
Yeah, I have. And there's two reasons for it, right? One is the amount of publicity the whole industry gets. I guess there's three reasons. So, when you have 10 TV shows on about flipping houses, and of course they make it look nice and glamorous and uber profitable, it attracts people into that business, right? I don't mean anybody who, when they hear what I do, isn't say, oh, I'd like to flip a house someday. Everybody says that to me, right? So that's one thing, the publicity, the business, and the glamour that's been
number one.
Yeah, that's number one. Number two, the ease of getting information has made it much easier. So really, you could sit in California and buy houses in Pennsylvania. You can go to Google Maps, you can get a satellite view, you could walk up and down the street, essentially as if you're having a camera.
Yeah, so technology and information has changed it.
It's made the world smaller. So you're not just competing with people that are willing to show up in the gold room of the courthouse the first Monday of the month. You're competing with people globally, literally.
Right.
And then three, Pittsburgh's, if it's not the best market in the country, it's got to be one of the very best markets and the top couple for profitability, whether you want to be a landlord or a flipper. So yeah, sure, our rents aren't as high as some other parts and our home values aren't as high, but people don't believe that you can buy houses for $20 and $30 and $40,000. It does not exist in most places.
Right.
Here, as you know, you can buy them and you can spend 50 or 60,000 on it and have 100 or 110 and sell it for 199 and net 75 or $80,000. Happens every day, literally, right? And there are parts of the country, you can't do that in California. You would need $1 million minimally to invest in a project. And yeah, you might make 150, but you've invested 10 times as much to make only twice as much. And most people are never going to have $1 million to invest in one project anyway.
Right. That's why the barrier to entry here is so much lower.
But those are the three reasons I think that we've seen a huge amount of competition.
100%. So at the sheriff sale, that's where, we do a lot of sheriff sales together. We used to go to the gold room, which was in the courthouse. Now it's all online.
Correct.
So we've seen more properties go under contract. Necessarily, they have to put a deposit down,
right? And
then they never come to the next level, which is coming up with the rest.
Right. They forfeit the property.
They forfeit. Okay. And man, I had one of our agents reach out to me and he goes, "Will you guys go to sheriff? So what about this property?" I go, I don't know about that one, but I bet Aaron does. I sent it to Aaron. He's like, "Oh yeah, I was inside." He sends pictures. He goes, "I offered 30 for that." This guy was offering like 50,
right?
50 or 60. And I'm like, "You shouldn't buy this. If Aaron's not buying it, you shouldn't buy it." And then he talked to Aaron and he looked at the pictures and he still bought it. And then he closed on it. Like he didn't forfeit it. So there's a lot of what I call dumb money out there, unfortunately. And it's caused it to be more difficult to find good deals. But that's just plain and simple. But it hasn't stopped me, hasn't deterred me, but it just has. And you have to adjust.
Well, I look on the bright side when I see a buyer like that, and I say, okay, there's one of my competitors who's out of action for the next several months.
Yeah.
Because he's wasted $40,000 or $50,000. He's going to start pouring money into this house. So his cash is tied up. His attention's tied up. He's probably going to lose money or certainly not make any money. So hopefully he'll move on to automobiles or watches or Bitcoins.
Well, he was lucky enough to know an agent who knew me, and I knew Aaron, and Aaron was in the house. I mean, he got the best information possible.
Not everybody wants to be helped.
All you can do is do the best you can. So where I'm at now in my career, I'm the same age as you. And it's funny when I asked you in this, I sent you a questionnaire and I said, do you have a long-term vision? Yada, yada. You said, I pretty much reached that vision.
Yep.
I'm not looking, in fact, you can retire.
Right.
In fact, you live in Arizona.
Correct.
Okay. But you like the work. You enjoy the game. You like what you do.
I like the people I deal with. I like to be challenged.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I'm never going to not work.
So Alex, my family had this goal to move to Arizona for the climate, for the lifestyle. And 5 years ago, we did it. And the whole family picked up, just like you picture, the moving vans, everything, right? And we moved off to Arizona. And my thought at the time was my ongoing businesses, I would generally allow them to trickle out to a close. I'd keep management for my rental properties, and that would be that. And I was in a financial position where that was fine. But I quickly realized not only did I not want to stop, I didn't want to trickle down. So what I do now, I spend about 8 days a month in Pennsylvania. I have a small condo here, and I fly back and I look to go see all my hard money projects and the progress on the projects and see what's going on there. I do all my research for my share sales where I buy a lot of properties like you. And that includes driving to every subject property I might put a bid on, and probably at least 2 or 3 comps for those. So I'm in my car the Saturday and Sunday before a sheriff sale, probably 10 hours each day. In winter, I'm fighting darkness in the morning and darkness in the afternoon.
Yeah, there you go.
And
that's dedication.
And that's because I truly have a passion. I love the business.
You don't have to do that.
I don't have to do it. And honestly, if I hit the Powerball tomorrow, other than being amazed because I don't play the Powerball, I put $1 billion in my bank account, I do the exact same thing next month. It's fun. It's challenging. I've met some unbelievably interesting people. And I just enjoy it. I'll do it as long as I'm physically able.
You put here, not looking to chase every rabbit.
Right.
And man, up until probably recently, and probably still to this day, I still tend to chase, but it took me a lot longer to mature, to stop chasing.
So here's a great cure for that. When you lend money, so nothing makes you stop chasing bad rabbits more than losing some money to them. So there are lenders out there, and I've seen them, and they've come and gone. We finance anybody kind of lenders where you're going to go bankrupt, right? So those are the rabbits I'm not going to chase. If somebody calls me and they don't have a source of income, they want to buy a house in a really tough neighborhood to make a profit, they will not get a work list together. I just say, hey, I don't think this is the right deal. I have a couple competitors I can steer you to if you'd like to talk to one of them. And I know in the long run, I'm so much better off than trying to nurse that person into becoming the customer that I need them to be. They're not going to be. Now, that's not to say I don't want to work with inexperienced people, because you talked about Omar, who you set my way, and he didn't have a lot of experience, but he wants to know and he wants to do things right. Just doesn't know.
He's willing to listen.
But he's like a sponge, so he's great to work with.
Right.
And he's an open book. He's not going to lie to me. He's not going to say, well, I have some income, but I can't tell you what it is. And I haven't done my taxes. That's why I can't give you a tax return. And I lost my W-2, so I can't show you this income. He's not that guy. He's legit and honest. And honestly, he's another reason I love doing it, to find a young kid. And, people who watch your podcast know his story, and to watch what he can accomplish. It's like the coolest thing, right?
Very cool. Love to see the success stories, whether it's local homegrown boy or a guy he's from Cairo, Egypt.
Yep.
So I love it. All right. So we talked about different stages of life and how my outlook has changed. Your outlook has obviously changed. You were probably chasing everything and wanting to, it sounds like to me, like you have your shit together more than I do. Like
I don't know about that.
You had more, control over your emotions, because you kind of stayed in your lane. You didn't veer off and buy shopping centers and You didn't develop land. You didn't do any of that.
So no, that's not true. I've
Oh, okay,
probably done all of that like one time, but
Okay.
and in fact, I'm stuck horribly in a land development deal now that I'd like to get out of.
Oh,
But
maybe I shouldn't have asked. Is it?
but here's the thing: like I've gotten involved in deals and said this stinks. Right? Here's a great deal. I bought from a bank a 72 unit apartment building in Sharon, Pennsylvania, and the bank, once they took it back, it was a foreclosure, had put a whole new elevator, spent $250,000 putting a new elevator and the mechanics for an elevator into this building. And I think I bought it for $265,000, the elevator, the building, and everything. So I'm like, well, how can I go wrong? It's 72 units. It's a real high rise apartment building. Like I'm big time, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, I'll make these units nice. I know Sharon's a little bit depressed, but people will come in because I'm going to have a great unit in the town at a fair price, and it'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I learned very quickly into the process that no one at that time was coming back to Sharon, no matter what you were doing. It was full of drugs and crime, and the people I wanted to rent to would not live in Sharon. So then I said to myself, well, that's fine. We'll be, although affordable housing wasn't a catchphrase back then, I'll be affordable housing, and I'll give this lower demographic, I'll give them a great place, and some will be on assistance, and some won't be, but it'll be the nicest affordable housing place. And I quickly realized that a lot of those people were going to ruin anything that you did. When you made it as quickly as you could make the building nice, somebody was there to destroy it. And it was sad and disheartening. It really was. Kind of made me cynical on that. And I was driving to Sharon every single Friday to go see my contractor's work, pay him for the work accomplished. I had a building manager work with him, make sure we were evicting who wasn't paying, making sure we were processing applications, just overseeing the business. For a year and a half, every Friday I went to Sharon. And for those of you who don't know where Sharon is, it's up on Route 80, and it snows 10 months a year up there. So it was gray, it snowed. I felt like a school kid who didn't have his work prepared on Friday mornings. I felt sick to my stomach because I had to go to Sharon on that day. And, I had investors, so I had to see the project through. And I saw it through, and we renovated and we sold it. And we did okay, not as great as I'd hoped, but we made money. And I said to myself, never again, like this lower end government assistant type housing far away from Allegheny County. It's just not for me. So now when somebody calls me and says, I've got this interesting deal, it's in Franklin, PA. I just say, no, I really stick to Allegheny County and the close in towns. And because I know, I just conjure back to what it felt like to get there. And so I have a land development deal that somebody sold me on to get into, and I bought into the plan, and the plan was great, just we couldn't execute it. And now we're looking to liquidate this land. And I've probably, while this has been going on, received 2 or 3 calls to either finance land deals or to get in. And I just say, I don't do raw land. I don't do development. Sorry, that's not my business. So I've chased that stuff.
Okay.
But one time on each category. I can't think of too many times where I've made the same mistake twice. I'm pretty good at that.
That's good. Well, and that's the thing that entrepreneurs and anybody starting a business, especially real estate investing, has to understand that you're going to make mistakes.
Sure.
And don't beat yourself up too bad and try to minimize those losses. That's what I do now when I go into a deal. I look at the best case, what I think is the best case, and I look at the worst case. And if I can live with that worst case scenario, then I'm going to pull the trigger because the upside's there,
Alex,
and it's in my wheelhouse.
Now, so you're a more experienced guy, so won't apply, but an entry-level person or a less experienced person, I could make a great case as to why they should do a deal and lose a couple bucks. I've seen deals that were going to be close, but we're safe. We weren't going to either going to make a little or break even. But here's what I said: look, you can't get hurt in this deal.
Right.
You might lose $5,000, but you have the money. You can lose it. You're going to learn how to run an entire project for $5,000.
Yeah.
Go to Carnegie Mellon and tell them you have $5,000. What will you teach me? You can't buy any education there.
That's so
At a
true.
community college, you could probably buy a course or two, but a lot of it would be theoretical and very little of it be practical. So if you could learn to flip a house, to acquire it, handle all the ongoing expenses, renovate it, and handle getting it sold, and it cost you $5,000 or $10,000, but didn't have much more downside risk than that.
Right.
I don't know anyone that gives educations cheaper than that.
Yeah. No, that's not a bad deal. It is. That's so true because I call it tuition. I do. I call it tuition. I say, yep, you paid $10,000 tuition there. That shoot, I've probably paid $1 million in tuition. But fortunately for me, that millions turned into multi-millions versus $1 million in just college debt and me working at, a $50,000 job.
Alex, I once was leaving the sheriff's sale and this young kid approached me and he said, "Sir, excuse me, you look like you know what you're doing, like you've been here before." I said, "Yeah, I'm here all the time." And he said, "Well, can you help me?" And I assumed he had a question. I said, "Yeah, what do you need?" He goes, "No, would you like mentor me?" And I said, "Well, I mentor you." He goes, "Yeah, show me how to do this." And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "I'm an engineer." And I said, "Where'd you go to school?" And he said, "Carnegie Mellon." And I said, "What did that cost you? Like 60 grand a year?" A while ago. And he said, he's like looking at me and said, "Yeah, yeah." And I said, "I tell you what, for $250,000, I'll mentor you. And it comes with a guarantee. I guarantee if you do everything I tell you, you'll make a lot more money than what Carnegie Mellon trained you to do as an engineer." And of course, I blew him away. I mean, it wasn't really a serious offer. And I knew he could take me. I said, "That's my point." I said, "Look, I don't mean to be a jerk, but you can't get trained to be a barber for free. I don't know why, I would give you this education." I said, "Just do it. Just do something small and you'll figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, it's not for you. Stick to being an engineer. But if you say, I made this mistake, and next time I have to do it this way, and I'll turn that $10,000 loss into a $15,000 gain and move off there." Fantastic. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it was Robert Kiyosaki who wrote the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
He'd mentioned that in how he would have to work for free, but he was working with his friend's multi-million-dollar dad.
Right.
And you guys are willing to work for free. And most people are like, no. But what you're going to learn is far head and shoulders above whatever you're ever going to learn anywhere else in any college.
Sure.
So yeah, I've had people come to me. You'd asked me who I had on the podcast. So when we were talking before we started recording, but a young kid, he's still in high school. He reached out to me last year. He goes, "Hey, I'd like to sit down with you and learn the business." Like, okay, come on in. So he comes in. Like, I like him a lot. He's a young kid and just very professional, very nice, well spoken. He came in twice a week. He would help my wife with filing, help my daughter with just push stuff in envelopes and stuff like that. And I took him on a couple road trips with me. We checked out some houses and everything. And he's been a really cool attribute to my life too, because I get to watch a kid who's very hungry, because not many kids are very hungry today. And so I had him on the podcast, and it was pretty awesome. And then we met with him, and I said, "Look, if you want to do a deal, I'll help you find a deal. Okay, I'll help you. We'll maybe partner up. Maybe we'll partner on something, because then you can learn a tremendous amount. Maybe we can do some deals together. Maybe we'll be business partners someday. I don't know. Maybe you'll go out on your own and you'll kick ass." But so that's where we're at.
Right.
He worked for free, and I gave him like $500 around Christmas for working for free as an intern, so to speak. I want to be conscious of your time. It's three things, the most important things off the top of your head that you need to be a successful entrepreneur. I wrote down a couple. I want to see what yours are.
First of all, you have to be willing to take the risk and just do it. See a lot of people that say, "I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and today I'm going to buy my fax machine and getting my line set up, and then I'm going to go look at lists I can get." Stop it. Find a deal and jump in and do it. Okay. So
I agree.
That takes the risk, right? So that's one thing. The next thing is be prepared to work hard. Any time you hire a supervisor for your project and think it's turnkey, you can walk away, that project's going to fail. Your supervisor or your project manager, they need a supervisor, and that's you. So in the end, if you're not willing to work hard on your project, it's probably going to fail. And that might mean picking up the cigarette butts off the front porch that the rude contractors left there all week because there's a showing at the end of the week. It's some disgusting and awful work. You can't sit in an ivory tower and do it. Like, you got to be really willing to work hard.
Hands on.
Too. And then I would say, especially in a market like Pittsburgh, treat people well, because it's a really small market. And when a new investor calls me,
I like that.
I pick the phone up if I haven't heard of that person, and I'll call somebody like you or one of our mutual friends and say, "Do you know so-and-so?" And if they're a real estate person in this market, usually in one phone call or certainly in two, I'll find somebody that knows them and knows what their reputation is. So if you plan to burn bridges, do it in a bigger city, because Pittsburgh's a really bad city for that, because especially in this real estate community, everyone knows everyone, so to speak. So treat people well. And
I
be
think
fair.
that works anywhere, but more importantly in a small,
Sure.
yeah.
Certainly in this business and in this town, if you don't, whether you're a contractor or a realtor or a lender, your bad reputation will spread, just like your good one. I spend my entire annual marketing budget is, I think, $1,200 a year. I buy an ad in Acre, I buy an ad in the RIA magazine, and I'm done.
And used to put those postcards at the sheriff's sale.
I don't do that anymore. I don't even invest. I don't invest at the postcards because what I found is, and hopefully it's because I've tried to treat people well and just at least be honest with people. Half of my customers are returning customers, so they were happy. Probably 25% were given to me by my returning customers,
Right?
and 25% are people that find me from the ads. So I think if you treat people well, you eliminate the need to have to pay to go buy customers. They'll come to you.
100%. All right, we'll finish it on this. Couple more things. What was your first deal?
Lending deal, flipping deal, or purchasing deal?
Your purchasing deal. Yeah.
To keep?
Yeah, to keep.
A friend of mine calls and says, there's an apartment building in Monroeville for sale. It looks really cool. It's called Presidential Village. I jumped into something way too big. It was 33 apartments in 3 11-unit pods and about a 10,000 square foot commercial building right on Monroeville Boulevard. It's a pretty big time property, but business was really good. I had some cash. I brought 2 good friends in on it with me, and we came up with our 25% or 20% down plus our closing costs. And we purchased the property. It had a management company in place. It was up and running, and we purchased it just as a cash flow property and a place to diversify our investments.
And that still own it to this day? Or
owned it for about 15 years. Had a guy knock on my door and say to me, and he had knocked several times before, I want to buy the property. And it probably his 5th time, I honestly got tired of him knocking. I said, listen, here's the price. If you want to buy it for this price, you can. You can inspect it. Don't call me after the inspection. If you don't like something, just don't buy it. I'm not fixing anything. I don't want to know what your inspector found. And I get a contract and I sign it thinking this guy's never going to close. And then I get a call from his bank saying that we're going to look to close on such a day. And I start getting kind of leery. And then I say, look, can I see a settlement sheet? And I see a settlement sheet where this guy needs to bring like $600,000 cash to the closing. I'm like, okay, we're definitely not going to close, or he's going to call and ask me to carry a second, in which case we're not going to the closing either. And we had a closing, and I got the check. And let me tell you what I learned from that. Don't ever sell anything good, because when I got done paying my taxes on my gain, my recapture of depreciation, paid off the mortgage I had on it, I had a decent chunk of money, but I didn't have the income from the property.
Right.
When I looked at it, I said, well, shoot, I like the income from the property more than I like this chunk of money. And I just made my partners in Washington, D.C. a nice chunk of money, and they didn't help too much in this. And that's why you don't see these apartment buildings hit the market. Nobody sells them. They pass them on from generation to generation, the good ones, generation, because the way the taxation works on it, it's really unpalatable to sell one. So that's what I learned from that.
Absolutely.
The first property I lent money on.
So you didn't have to sell it either. You weren't even in a position where, I have to sell this.
He wore me out. The buyer wore me out. He
Yeah.
just had it. And I threw a number at him I thought he would say no to.
Right. That's so funny.
Yep. And my first lending deal was my accountant at the time did business with Mr. Water Heater. And Mr. Water Heater had a guy who drove the van around and installed water heaters, who wanted to flip a house. And somehow it went from him to his boss to my accountant back to me. And a kid came recommended. And I lent the money to buy a duplex on Penn Avenue in Wilkinsburg. And he bought it, he fixed it, he flipped it, he paid me all along, and he paid me back at the end. And that was the deal I took from beginning to end. It was probably about 7 months, and collected payments in the meantime. And it went totally smooth. It was great. Yeah. No problem.
That was your first.
That was the first hard money.
First finance deal.
And the first flip I did was a house in Polish Hill. Remember, it was on Melwood Street. Paid $20,000 for it. We put about $60,000 in it. We sold it for $129,000. Meanwhile, you couldn't buy a shell in Polish Hill now for $129,000.
Yeah, no kidding.
And my partner and I split about $40,000 on it. We each made $20,000 in probably 4 months. And I'm like, that was pretty easy.
I would take that today. That's
Take that.
That's a good
but
deal.
you can't buy that shell for $20,000. You can really buy anything for 20 anymore. Probably
Yeah.
a $300,000 house.
How many properties should you have kept? that would have doubled in value in like 5 years?
Well,
A
look,
lot, a few?
all of them, right? But here's the thing,
True.
because I
True.
got my investment back and my profit back,
Mhm.
it enabled me to do 2 more deals or
Yeah.
a deal and a half.
Yeah.
So people say, like, is it better to buy and hold or better to flip? And I said, well, you need to let the property and your circumstances dictate, because both can be
Exactly.
good depending on your situation.
I say it all the time. I've sold so many properties that I shouldn't have, but at the time I needed to, because financially I needed to.
Well, I flipped
You know?
properties 15 years ago
Yeah.
for 300,000 or worth 500,000, saying, boy, it'd been great to have rented them and then picked up $200,000 more
gosh.
today. But
Yeah.
most of the other deals that I've done in the meantime, I wouldn't have been able to do because my cash would have been tied up.
Right.
So
Yeah. You gotta look at it that way
Sure.
too. And we'll end on this. 3 things or points, suggestions, whatever you want to call it, to a new investor, or even a seasoned real estate investor. What are the 3 most important things that off the top of your head?
associate yourself with really knowledgeable people. Alex, the second thing I would tell somebody is to remember in real estate, and one of these phony baloney guys who used to sell the classes for $30,000 back when that was vogue, I sat in and listened to one of his classes. I was there as the hard money guy, then to speak to the people. And so much of what he said worked in theory, but never in the real world. But one thing he said, I always remember, and it really rings true. Remember, real estate is a get rich slow game, not a get rich quick game.
No doubt. Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
So if you think you're coming into it and you're going to make $200,000 your first year, you're wasting your time. You're not going to. You will get rich if you get involved, do the right things, and stay with it over a period of time.
Yeah.
Real estate always makes people rich. It never doesn't, right? Given enough time, if you do the right things.
Absolutely.
But it happens slowly, not quickly. And the third thing I tell somebody is live below your means.
Below your means. Oh,
I see-
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
see some of these guys who are into self-promotion, and
Mhm.
I could probably take a pretty educated guess where they're at financially, and they're driving $300,000 cars. And I don't drive a $300,000 car or $100,000 car for that matter. And they're living in $2 million houses, which in Pittsburgh is as nice as you get. They probably has a $12,000 mortgage on it. And, you know, there's one, you're burning a lot of cash. And 2, you're not at all in position to withstand the downturn or take advantage of a great opportunity. You know,
Yeah.
dry powder is great. You know, if you can get yourself in a position where a 50,000 or a 500,000 or $1 million deal falls in front of you and you can pounce on it because you can do it right then, that's pretty good. So I tell people, try to live below your means, not at them and certainly not above them.
100%. Man,
Those would be the 3 things.
you know,
I'd tell somebody.
what I learned from my mother, and you probably learned this from your parents, was just how to squeeze a penny. Learned that, and then just learned some of the things you talked about just from doing what I do. And living below your means is one of them. I mean, because yeah, I could go buy a $500,000 car and a $2 million house, but I'm preparing myself for the downturn, which is kind of now. I think it's just the tip of the downturn. And you know, I went out and got a bunch of lines of credit, and I made sure I'm financially strong, money in the bank, because I'm waiting for the deals now
They're coming.
to be more prevalent.
They're coming.
And position myself. I don't have to drive around. Yeah, it's just it's delayed gratification is so important. Absolutely 100%. I couldn't have said that better myself. I thank you for coming in, man. I really do appreciate it. I wanted to have you in because you're a very bright guy.
Thanks.
I'm not the brightest, but I'm telling you, I barely got
Come
through
on,
high
Alex.
school.
Come on.
It's
I think everything we talked about today, nothing had any of it to do with how you did in calculus. It
absolutely
talked about
didn't.
how hard you're willing to work. Are you willing to have a plan? Are you willing to associate with the right people and treat people right?
Yeah.
None of it said, do you have an IQ of 123? What'd you score in your SATs? And where's your degree from? None of that stuff
None of
really
that.
is important, is
None
it?
of that was important. Hard work. We talked hard work, go the extra mile, treat people good. And that's just period. Whether you're doing new construction, whether you're a plumber, what doesn't matter.
You know, it doesn't. I always
Doesn't
tell
matter.
people, especially in this country, and it's like one of the reasons I like to watch Omar thrive, because it makes you even more proud of this country, right? It's
Mhm.
great for him, but
Right.
it makes you proud of your country. Because I say, and I mean this literally, I don't know a human being in the world that hasn't worked hard consistently for a period of time and treated people well who hasn't been successful.
Yeah.
Now, of course, everyone's definition of success might be a
Sure.
little bit different,
Yeah.
but I cannot show you a person and say, boy, this guy or gal for a long time worked hard all the time and treated people great and just is stuck at the bottom. It doesn't happen in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great about this country is it's what Omar said to me. I said, what about, ask him, options are there? Like, so you work hard, you educate yourself. What do you have available to you in Cairo? Because there's hardly nothing. You could be the hardest, you could work 3 jobs, you could do what I do here, and you get nowhere.
Right.
You get nowhere.
Right.
And now he works 3 just as hard as he would back there, and the sky's the limit.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's what this country brings.
Sure,
Which I love about
absolutely.
it. I appreciate it. Now, how can people find you for hard money lending?
Okay. As I mentioned, I don't advertise much, so you're not going to find a website.
Mhm.
You're going to call me at 412-401-6214. My name is Mark Wolper.
Or send you a letter.
Or you can send me an email, Mark
Okay.
at idealpa, idealpa.com, or
Okay.
shoot me a text. And one thing you'll find is you'll hear back from me usually within the hour. I'm very available. Love what I'm doing, so it's nothing I procrastinate till I have to do it. Love kicking through deals. So, if you're interested, and you need to borrow private money, you got a house that you'd like to sell really cheap so I could flip it and make some money, call me. But I think the most way I could probably help some of your people is through private lending and some of the experience and advice I could give them along the way.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. And see all those people, like one of my other partners, Ian Hoover, he's all big on social media, and that's why I'm doing the podcast.
Right.
Okay. And websites. This guy's highly successful. Doesn't even have a website.
Nope.
What does that tell you?
Phone rings. The phone rings and I pick it up.
Pick it up. That's it. Thanks, buddy. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Alex.
it.
Take care.
Yeah, that was good, man. I appreciate that.
Recording.
Yeah, well,